So today we're going to be learning about foiling, trinomial factoring, a difference of two squares, GCF, and factoring by grouping. So let's take these two binomials, x plus 3 and x plus 5. Well, how do we multiply these together? Well, this is where FOIL comes in. So FOIL basically lists out the steps you need to do to multiply these two binomials together. So first, you do the first terms of each, okay? So the x from the first term and then the x from the second term, you multiply these together to get x squared. Then you do the outer ones. So the x and the 5 are the outer ones. Multiply those together, you get 5x. Now you multiply the inner terms together. So the 3 and the x on the inside, you multiply these together to get 3x. And then finally, you multiply the last terms, which is the 3 and the 5. So you get 15. And now, when you simplify this, you get x squared plus 8x plus 15. And factoring is just the opposite of this. So right now we have this trinomial from multiplying these binomials together. So how do we get from this trinomial back to these two binomials? Well, factoring is just the opposite of foiling. And all we need to do here for this problem is just find two numbers that multiply to be 15 and add up to be 8. We start off with x times x because that's what gets us to the x squared. And we have two positive signs because the whole equation is positive. Now, what are the two numbers that multiply to be 15 and add up to be 8? 5 and 3. So we just put x plus 5 and x plus 3, and then we get our original equation, which is x plus 3 times x plus 5. Now we're going to learn about the difference of two squares. And the formula for this is a squared minus b squared is a plus b times a minus b. Now this might seem confusing at first, but because there's only two terms here, but don't worry, we're going to do problems on this. So we start off, let's say our equation is x squared minus 4, okay? You see how those two numbers are perfect squares, x squared and 4? And what we can do is, well, what's the square root of x squared? That's just x. And then what's the square root of 4? That's 2. So what you can do is x plus 2 and then x minus 2. Now the reason why this doesn't give a trinomial is because, well, let's FOIL it. So x times x is x squared, and x times negative 2 is negative 2x, and x times 2 is 2x, and 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. And you see how the 2x and the negative 2x cancel out? That's why the difference of two squares, it only has two terms. Now we're going to talk about how to factor by taking out the GCF. So the GCF is the largest factor that a set of numbers shares. And before we get into taking out the GCF in a trinomial, let's do some practice problems. So 15x plus 3. What do these two things have in common? They both share a greatest common factor of 3. So you can factor out the 3. So you get 3 times, what times 3 is 15x? 5x. What times 3 is 3? 1. So you get 3 times 5x plus 1. Now the second one, x squared plus 2x. What goes into both of these numbers? What do these numbers have in common? They both have an x in them. So you can factor out an x, you get x times, what times x is x squared? X. And what times x is 2x? 2. So you get x times x plus 2. Don't be intimidated by this. Okay, we'll go through this step by step. So, all of these numbers, what is their greatest common factor? Well, all of them have a 2x in them, right? So, we could factor out a 2x. So, you get 2x times what times 2x is x, 2x to the third? X squared. What times 2x is negative 18x squared? Negative 9x. And what times 2x is 40x? 20. So your equation is 2x times x squared minus 9x plus 20. And now all you got to do is use trinomial factoring for this one. So what two numbers multiply to be 20 and add up to be negative 9? Well, we know that these two numbers, they have to be negative because a negative times a negative makes a positive, and a negative plus a negative makes a negative. And going through these factors, we find out that the answer to this, the two numbers, is 5 and 4. So your final answer is 2x times x minus 5 times x. Finally, we have factoring by grouping. So for this equation, what I want you to do is multiply the coefficient of the first term, so 6, and multiply it by the last term, which is 6. So you get 36. And I want you to find two numbers that multiply to be 36 and add up to be negative 13. One cool trick you could do to find factors is you could get your graphing calculator and you can plug in your last term, in this case 36, divided by x, and you would get all the factors. Now, those two factors that multiply to 36 and add up to be negative 13 is negative 9 and negative 4. And what you do is you substitute this into the equation. So you break the negative 13x up into the factors that make up the 36. So you would do 6x squared minus 9x now minus 4x plus 6. And you see how we didn't take any numbers out. All we did was just rearrange this equation. We just broke this equation up. So you get 6x squared minus 9x minus 4x plus 6. And you can find a GCF of the first two terms, and then you find a GCF of the last two terms. So in the first two terms, it shares a 3x. Both of 6x squared and negative 9x, they both share a 3x. So what you would do is factor out the 3x. 3x times 2x, because 3x times 2x is 6x squared. And then 3x times what is negative 9x? Negative 3. So 3x times 2x minus 3. And then you factor out the negative 2 in the last two terms because that's the GCF of negative 4x plus 6. And you would get 2x minus 3 also. And if the terms in the parentheses are the same, what you could do is you can combine the 3x and the negative 2, so the term's not in the parentheses, and you can multiply it by the things in the parentheses. So you get 3x minus 2 times 2x minus 3, and there's your answer. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and